Keys to the Shop, episode 115, Finding Success in Mobile Coffee, with Tim Cox of Cart Espresso and Communion Cafe. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and I'm really glad you decided to join us today because today's topic is such a very important one because at one point or another, you are going to be brewing coffee outside your shop and you need to be able to do it well so that you can spread the reputation of your shop and your service, and it's just a really great added bonus for your business. And our guest today, Tim Cox, is going to lay out some great strategies for us to apply when starting our own mobile operations in coffee. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is a specialty coffee equipment supplier, and they're based out of Louisville, Kentucky. And from the beginning of their business, they have set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public and also professionals. Their focus is on curating the best equipment for every need, from grinders to espresso machines, under-counter refrigeration, equipment both large and small. They pretty much have what you need. They put a big emphasis on having the expertise to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. So no matter what you're looking at, like say you're opening a coffee shop and you need equipment for it. That's a obvious thing. Who do you turn to? I would encourage you to turn to Prima Coffee. So just go to prima-coffee.com. That's prima-coffee.com and reach out to them via email or phone and let them help you get the right gear to fit your situation. Be sure to let them know that Keys to the Shop sent you, and my thanks to Prima for their support of Keys to the Shop. And now this episode is also brought to you by Pacific Foods. They are the people behind the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages, which are designed specifically for the professional barista and the standards for excellence that they demand. So we could be talking about almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk. It doesn't matter. Its ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an amazing silky texture, and keep the flavor balance focused on the coffee, that all makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Now, Pacific has been a huge supporter of specialty coffee for a long time. They demonstrate their passion by creating great products like this that were born from listening to and serving the needs of real specialty service professionals. So please go to pacificfoods.com to learn more about the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages and see how they can help elevate the non-dairy offerings in your cafe. Thank you very much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. Okay, so today we get to talk about an element that is so critical in business, and that is getting out there and getting to know your community through serving them coffee. Opening a space, you have to get people in your doors. It's quite different, though, when you show up in places where people don't necessarily expect quality coffee. It's really nice to go to a wedding or to a farmer's market or some kind of a corporate meeting or whatever it might be, where you are hired to bring your coffee, and the guests are really treated to this high-quality beverage, and they end up coming to your shop, and they become customers. I've seen it over and over again. I love doing mobile operations. I love doing farmers markets. It's just a different animal altogether. Very unique experience. It's pretty thrilling, if you ask me. But the differences between that and the cafe setting can trip you up as well. And that's where this conversation comes in trying to help equip you to do operations mobily well, to do it successfully. And to that end, I am really excited to welcome Tim Cox of Cart Espresso and a Communion Cafe to the show. So Tim has been in the coffee industry for 6 years, and in those 6 years, he has undertaken an incredible amount of work. He's worked as a barista, a general manager, a technician and barista trainer, director of operations for Ascension Coffee Roasters, and now he is the owner and operator of Cart Espresso, which is a catering and events company in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. He is also the co-owner of Communion Cafe, and that is a brick and mortar cafe that does everything from cocktails and food to high-end coffee. Tim has a great amount of experience also in volunteer work through the SCA. He's a level 1 and 2 certified barista, an SCA lead instructor, and certified technician. Tim comes supremely qualified in talking to us about what it takes to run a successful operation mobily and more. So in this conversation, we talk about everything from how to set up the agreement between you and the person who's hiring you, managing expectations, preparing yourself and your staff, equipment needs, how to behave at the event, what items should you put on your menu, how much do you think you should spend when it comes to outfitting your mobile operation. There's a lot to discuss. So let me bring you right to this discussion with Tim Cox of Cart Espresso. Hi, Tim. Welcome to Keys to the Shop. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We are going to be discussing a lot of stuff around mobile coffee and events, and you have a pretty rich history in coffee coming into this, and coffee and restaurant work. I wonder if you can just kind of give us the backstory, of your coming into coffee and how restaurant work and eventually mobile operations became a part of all this for you.
Sure. Well, I got a job when I was young. I was 15, so the restaurant industry was pretty much what I was limited to there. So that's kind of how I started working in restaurants, and started as a busboy and then a cashier and a supervisor and stuff like that. So when I had graduated high school, I kind of did the typical I'm young and I'm going to move somewhere exciting and I'm going to go to New York City kind of thing. And that lasted about maybe 8 months. And then I realized I didn't have any money. So I ended up back in the Dallas area, and I needed a job. And my friend was working at Starbucks at the time. So, like a lot of people, I kind of just got into coffee by chance and I took it as a job. But during my time there, I don't think that is necessarily what developed my passion for coffee, but it did kind of spark my infatuation with the cafe environment, having regulars, seeing, the variety of ways that people choose to use a coffee shop space and what it means to different people, and just the community aspect, really attractive. And then also just, I have a passion for serving and hospitality and making people feel good, and it provided me plenty of opportunity to do that. So I did like my job there. Moved on to an independent shop opening up in the suburb I was living in, and they were a little more coffee focused. They used Cuvée coffee from Austin, Texas. So after a short time at that company, we got some training from the Cuvée crew, and this was kind of the first time that I'd had a properly dialed in shot of espresso. So while coffee had kind of been a caffeine delivery mechanism previously for me, I drank this shot and I thought, wow, that's delicious. And I never had coffee that tasted like that before. That kind of aha moment kind of piqued my interest in coffee itself. And then I kind of just went down the rabbit hole that a lot of baristas do of, researching, and I was reading David Schomer's books and James Hoffman's blog a lot, and started attending local cuppings and throwdowns and stuff. So at the encouragement of some more tenured coffee folks that I knew, in 2011, 2012, I attended some Barista Guild camps and stuff like that. Those experiences are really what made me start to view coffee industry as a career choice outside of just, a job, until I figured out what I wanted to do. Seeing how passionate everybody was, how connected this worldwide industry was, and how enthusiastic everybody was about helping others succeed. Everybody seems so passionate about training and helping people and developing this community, and that's what really stuck out to me. So at that point, I moved on to help open a new concept with some people. I wasn't a partner, but I had the coffee experience, was kind of my contribution to the team. So at this point where I kind of had the bulk of creative input, it was a really rewarding experience, and one through which I learned a lot. The biggest lesson, I guess, that I learned there was how to really listen to guests. Previously, I'd been working within the context of kind of a laid out plan, and here kind of being responsible for the experience a little more and hearing the feedback, learning how to respect the guest wants and needs while, also maintaining the experience that we wanted to provide. Sometimes there's a measure of swallowing your pride and admitting you don't know what was best. So I think that was probably my biggest gain there. So over the next year or so, I really wanted to get into the wholesale aspect of coffee. So I took a role as a barista trainer and a technician for a while. And I was director of coffee for a local roasting company here for about 3 years. Kind of simultaneously at this time, I started volunteering more with the BGA, started a catering company with my buddy Kyle, and that was kind of my introduction to mobile coffee service.
Mm-hmm. And that's Rail Cart Espresso.
Rail Cart Espresso, yes. So then kind of after that, shopping a business plan, I was doing some independent tech work and consulting, doing a little writing and stuff, and figuring out where I wanted to go. And that ultimately ended up, with a partnership with my friend Tim Kale and the endeavor to which we're currently mostly devoted, which is Communion Cafe.
So Communion Cafe is also food.
Yeah, we do breakfast, lunch, dinner. We do brunch on the weekends. We've got well over 100 whiskeys. We do cocktails, beer, wine, and then also a pretty developed coffee program. So there's a lot going on.
Wow. So you're doing both Rail Cart Espresso and Communion Cafe at the same time. What does your experience from hospitality in both food concepts and coffee concepts do for you in your perception of hospitality?
I think that the opportunity to provide other experiences, like particularly food, can provide a deeper hospitality experience, or an opportunity to provide that deeper experience. A lot of coffee interactions can be pretty quick. A lot of folks are taking their beverage to go, or if you're serving somebody an espresso or cappuccino, even if they stick around, they're likely going to consume it fairly quickly. But being able to provide a more comprehensive service, like in the context of an entire meal, and being able to recommend pairings and having more of a variety of beverages and just simply getting to spend more time with each table and each guest, I think really opens up opportunities to serve people more deeply. I think there's a talent that a lot of baristas really excel in to accomplish great service quickly and effectively in these short interactions. And we still certainly do have a lot of those, but we also provide a space where people can come in. They might pop in for a cortado in the morning and then go to work, and then they can come back at night. They can bring their spouse or their family, and they can have a meal, and they can meet for happy hour and have cocktails. And there's just, I feel, a more diverse range of hospitality experiences that we can offer with what we do offer.
So when you started Railcart Espresso, what was the driving, the mission behind that? What is it that keeps you continuing to operate that, and what's the passion behind it to do it alongside of Communion Cafe? Because it's definitely an endeavor to continue both operations.
Yeah, running any business is a lot of work, but I think what is most special about the mobile operations and the catering is being able to bring a specialty coffee experience to places where you wouldn't normally find it. Even Dallas is a pretty big city, and we've got, maybe a couple dozen, higher end specialty cafes. So depending on what neighborhood you're in, you kind of have to, it's an experience that you still have to seek out. And then when you take it to the context of a corporate event, or a wedding, an office gathering, those aren't situations where you would typically expect to find really good coffee or, even really good hospitality. So being able to bring these experiences to people that really aren't expecting it or not familiar with it is a really fun opportunity.
So you're taking this to people that might not get to see it very often. Have you had experiences where it's really just changed somebody's perception of coffee, where you start to see them become a specialty coffee customer wherein before they might not have been?
Yeah, and even previous to this endeavor, people would come seek us out where we were working because they met us at an event and had this experience. And you see those experiences happen fairly often in a coffee shop, but it's definitely less common because, a lot of people are going to this shop because they're familiar with the product and because they're seeking that experience. And so in the context of the catering, I think we see that maybe more frequently. And, it's really encouraging when you're working a shift and, everybody you're serving seems blown away. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is fun. A lot of people are used to events that are catered with maybe the lowest common denominator, food and beverage.
Right.
And it might be the first wedding where they've actually had a really high-end experience. And that's definitely an awesome aspect of it. So owners of coffee shops looking for ways to sort of increase their footprint in their communities, and they're looking at starting a cart or starting a operation that goes and does events and things like that. What are the starting points for somebody who wants to do this well and be successful in doing mobile operations?
Well, I think especially for like a cafe or an established business, to start something in a mobile context, they're going to have a lot of built-in advantages of, brand recognition, and they'll probably have a location already kind of certified for food service and stuff like that. But a lot of the things to consider getting to going, I would say equipment is probably the number one thing that comes to mind. If you're in a cafe and you leave your machine on all the time, or you have this huge machine, like you can take for granted temperature and steam pressure and things like that. And when you're doing catering, to exactly the type of electricity you might want. So for our catering, we use a 120 volt machine, a single group. We would love to have a larger machine, but we found that the electrical requirements of that limit the amount of spaces and what types of venues you can participate in. So then, we've identified that we have this need for our machine. Then we have to look at what can heat up quickly, what can maintain its heat. In our particular situation, we chose a Nueva Simonelli Appia. It's got a large boiler and pretty thermally stable. It stays really hot. We've had really busy events and not really experienced any issues there. I know people that have gotten significantly more expensive and flashier looking equipment for catering, and then they've had issues being able to maintain the volume they're trying to do, or durability issues. It's another thing. We picked a machine that had parts that were cheap, easily accessible. It's a machine that's easy to work on. You're going to have a lot of wear and tear moving it around. So just a lot of those logistics, having contingency plans for sure, because you never know what's going to go wrong. And when you're in a cafe, you can say, we're having these issues, come see us later in the day or come see us tomorrow. But when you're doing a catering event, that's kind of your one shot for serving your product, So having parts on hand, having water fittings, having plenty of tools, identifying every area where you think something might be able to go wrong. We've definitely had stressful moments of, trying to repair a grinder in 30 minutes so that we can get rolling. And, thankfully we've been prepared and we've gotten through it, for the most part. But I think the type of setup is, important to think about. A cart is a really easy option. It's very easy to push it around and kind of to move it. But then additionally, there can be size restrictions of where you can take it and fit it through. We've had events that were on, the 13th floor of an apartment building and having to carry our equipment through tight spaces that a large cart wouldn't fit through. And then, carts require a trailer or a truck for transportation. So what we did is we built kind of a bar with a facade that we can disassemble and it kind of breaks down, and then we can move it that way. But it's still heavy and having to move that around, there's thinking of where you might want to be and what challenges that might present is a good way to get a foundation to consider where to start.
And you could do that by simply looking at who else in the space is doing catering and kind of what their business looks like.
Sure. Yeah. We reached out to, we didn't really know folks within kind of our own market doing what we were trying to do, but we reached out to people that we knew in some other areas and got really good feedback from them. Regarding how to kind of approach, our physical setup and our equipment and just some of the logistics of running an event. And, we had the good fortune of knowing a lot of good connections. We knew people involved in catering that assisted us in, how to structure pricing and invoicing and how to sell our services in a way that conveyed value. Reached out to some other coffee technicians for input on equipment and, So we definitely reached out to people that knew more than we did about certain aspects of what we were trying to do, and that set us up way more for success for sure.
What are some of the early mistakes that you made in getting your mobile operations up and going?
I think really just not knowing what we didn't know yet. We had an early event where, we brought extra water line, we brought extra water fittings, and then we ended up springing a leak. By the time we identified it, there was quite a bit of water, and we were able to quickly fix the leak because we were prepared in that situation, but we had no towels. We had a few small terry towels, a few microfiber towels for espresso baskets and stuff like that, but we did not have the ability to clean up a large amount of water. And, in retrospect, we're carrying around large amounts of water and pumping it all over in a mobile situation. So, of course, it makes sense that you'd have a way to address a water situation. But, so they're just little things like that, I would say. It's kind of one of those situations where a lot of it, you can feel like you're, with any business, you feel like you're as prepared as you can be, and then you learn how you weren't.
What is it that somebody who is just starting should be prepared to spend in general on an operation like this?
There's a fair amount of flexibility there. I have seen catering operations that, have a $12,000 espresso machine and a beautiful cart that probably costs several $1,000s. And, like with anything, you can spend as much as you want, really. We got our initial setup going for between $5,000 and $10,000. So for us at the time, especially, it was a significant investment. But we started with a model that was more accessible for us at the time, and then we found that we really loved what we were doing there. So that was fortunate.
Excellent. Yeah, it does seem pretty entry level in terms of cost, compared to opening an actual coffee bar.
Sure.
Plus, it seems like you could get your name out there pretty well in the community, and by the time you open a brick and mortar, you're definitely a known entity.
Yeah, absolutely. It did give us definitely a lot of exposure, the opportunity to meet a lot of great people, to network. Met a lot of people, mostly outside of the coffee industry. When you work in a shop, you meet a lot of people in the industry and you build those connections, and that can often lead to cool relationships and partnerships and stuff. But, we got to meet a lot of people in a lot of different industries or just, depending on where we be, just all the different contexts of meeting people was great for forming connections that would help us in the future.
You're saving people's lives with this coffee sometimes if there are no, especially corporate events where they might not technically want to be there, but there's good coffee.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're at an event, when you're getting ready to do this, you're going to advertise what you can and cannot make. And what I've seen in the past is there's maybe menus that are impractical for a mobile event and ones that are practical. Can you kind of give us an idea of how we should be thinking of setting up a menu that is actually doable when you're out there?
Yeah, I think less is more most of the time. Like even in the context of a restaurant or a cafe, you can do as much as you want, but make sure that you can do it really well. So if you can manage to do a large menu and execute it consistently and perfectly, then by all means go for that. But if you need a more limited menu to be able to execute in a way that you're really proud of, then do that. And I think in the context of mobile service, it's really important to kind of limit what you can do. And a lot of people want a lot of different things. We have people ask for, slushies and like huge batches of 10 gallons of hot chocolate, and they want all these different kinds of teas and flavors of things. And sometimes you just have to say, look, this is what we do and this is why we do it, and we want to be able to serve you really in a way that we're confident. So, we kind of do just basic drinks. We do espressos, cappuccinos, lattes, stuff like that. We use just maybe 2 or 3 flavor syrups. Usually we have recipes that we make ourselves. We can expand that a little bit if people really want it, but always something that we make, we feel is high quality. In terms of, a lot of the other stuff people ask for, teas and pour overs and all that, like, sometimes we just have to say no, especially if we don't have extra help available at the time, or a lot of times people have misconceptions about kettles and hot water towers on top of this espresso machine and other things. And you're like, there's plenty of outlets everywhere, but they don't understand that maybe you're going to overload that circuit. So what we found works really well is we have an estimate form that just really clearly itemizes everything that we have available to offer, what that costs, and people can see right in front of them. They can build their own package essentially. And I think that's really important. I would definitely recommend having a very clear communication and some sort of estimate form that your client will sign prior to the event.
That lists prices on it as well?
Prices and everything. You don't want there to be any surprises when it comes time to set up and go. You don't want any surprises when it's time that you're turning in an invoice and expecting to get paid. So clear communication is just vitally important, I would say, because, like we said, this is one short period of time that you have to execute your service. And the more you know going into it, the easier it's going to be to do that well.
Yeah. And generally speaking, the length of time of service that you're set up for, what is that averaged for you?
I would say the average is probably like 2 to 4 hours.
Mm-hmm. Are you paying people a catering wage, like your staff a catering wage for doing an event? Like a higher than the hourly, like if you have a barista?
Yeah, we pay higher than an average barista wage. Sure. And then also tips and stuff like that. But honestly, in our experience, tips in a cafe seem to be significantly more substantial than at an event. If somebody's at a wedding they were invited to, or they're at a corporate event that their job required them to be at, if they're not necessarily shell out a bunch of cash on tips for free coffee, Yeah,
they might not have any cash on them.
Exactly.
And is there a situation, this is maybe a side question, but I've had this question in the past. Tips at farmers markets, of course, yes, that's great. But are there events where tipping is just kind of like, you kind of don't want to do that?
That's a really good question. I guess that's something that we would approach kind of a case-by-case basis. But, often we'll set up and we won't even think about tips and we just start working, and then usually we realize we didn't put out a tip jar because people are asking that they want to tip. I would say maybe if it was like a charity event or something, that's probably where I would examine whether or not what we wanted to do that. But for the most part, if somebody wants to tip the people that are helping us out, we're happy to let them do that.
Okay, so kind of let the situation lead you into whether or not that's gonna happen, but don't like plop down a large cookie jar that says tips on it as soon as you arrive.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a lot of different aspects of these mobile events that you kind of have to consider on a case-by-case basis like that. Like as far as how you're going to present yourself, we're in Texas and it's hot, and if we're doing an event outside in the summer, you're not going to be wearing a tie, but if we go to a really formal event where we know that that's the expectation that is there for everybody else, we're certainly going to present ourselves in a professional and formal manner that way too. So that can relate to the menu and just a lot of aspects of kind of tailoring these experiences to the particular job, which is kind of a fun challenge, honestly, because that's not something that you really, if you have a job where you're working in a cafe, it's the same thing every day and you know what to do. Learning how to kind of adapt to some of these different situations is always a fun learning opportunity.
So when you are getting ready for an event, I imagine you have to scope out the venue ahead of time to know what to expect.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend getting into that building, putting your eyes on everything, like even things that seem really obvious. An example, I was doing a mobile event, and this is actually within the context of a previous job that I had, but they wanted 2 3-group espresso machines at this event, 2 different stations.
Wow.
It was a hotel and they had conference rooms and stuff. So I went up there and I met with the director of their facilities, who was an engineer, I believe. And I'm explaining to him, I don't have, the machine with me, but I'm telling him, the type of receptacle that I need. And he's like, yeah, we have everything. It doesn't matter. We have plenty of electricity and whatever kind of receptacle you need. We have it on hand for sure. And I didn't really think to ask, can I see that? So I took his word for it. And then on the day of the event, we show up with 2-3 group espresso machines and find out that we don't have the correct way to hook up the electricity.
Of course.
So at this point, we've got an hour before this event, and there's really no way to address that specific problem. So I had to run to our roastery, get a machine, a single group machine that was ours. Had a single group machine I was repairing for a client, had to call them, ask them if they were okay with us using it quickly for this event, speed back over there and hook up these 2 single group machines, and then serve like, I don't remember, several hundred people in like a 45-minute span that we're doing off these 2 one group machines, because we were falsely confident that we had the correct electrical setup, So I would definitely get up there, make sure that if you have any plumbing requirements, they're there. If you have electrical requirements, that they're correct, and make sure you know what you're getting into.
You build all of this, preemptive work into the cost of the actual, the estimate form you're talking about. Is this all built into the cost?
Yeah, so there's things that we account for in terms of like equipment depreciation, and some of that goes towards like some of the spare parts and stuff that we might need or use or potentially transportation, labor. We try to just list out as much as possible, because a lot of times catering in general is expensive, and oftentimes with coffee, people aren't used to valuing coffee as a product often, if they're especially not part of the industry or familiar with specialty coffee. So they say they want, several hours, 100 people, and they expect it's going to cost next to nothing. So sometimes, you give your quote and it's much more than what people were expecting. But being able to really itemize that out and express what they're paying for. And by the time you show, gas fees and labor fees and the cost of goods and everything's right in front of them, and they know what you're paying for and what you're actually making off of it, then that makes it make more sense to people.
Okay. So is that something that is immediate? Do you give that to them immediately, the itemized thing? Or is it just like, here's our cost, and if you want to know, we'll send you an itemized?
I always just send it itemized with the quotation. Just so they know. I think I try to be as transparent as possible, and I've just found that to be an effective way.
I want to go back to this idea of how you are in a space, because so much of how people, I've had a booth next to restaurants that have their staff working for them. Like a barbecue restaurant will have their staff handing out, pulled pork next to our booth that's doing lattes. And sometimes I'm amazed at the low level of service that the staff at other booths are giving. And it really just creates this, what I think of as just a horrible impression of the brand. What kind of planning and training do you recommend people do with their staff to get them ready to be alert? I mean, you're alert. You're like coffee professional times 10. Somebody just coming into barista work might need some coaching. Like, how do you coach people to, on the day, be a good representative of your brand and company?
Well, I think part of that is selecting the right people. If you're a cafe or if you're a barbecue restaurant and you're serving the pulled pork out of your booth, like, pick the people that you want representing your brand well. The people that do it in your store well can probably do it well in another location as well, in terms of communicating your brand and your culture. A big thing that I would recommend is train your staff, or who's going to be working this mobile setup, in that kind of environment. So anybody that we would have working with us, or when we initially started, we would set our equipment up in different places and train there. Because if you're working in a coffee bar and you have 20 feet of bar space that you're working on, or however much you have, it's probably more than what your mobile setup is. It's very different, especially if you have several people sharing, a 6 or 7 foot table, and somebody's doing espressos and somebody's doing milk and somebody's building drinks and pouring drinks and serving them and taking money and swiping credit cards. Like, there's so much going on. I would definitely drill in that situation, and then have the same people help you as often as possible, so that they're used to what's going on. They know the lay of the land, and then they don't have all of these new things to get used to on the fly as they're serving. in terms of preparation, like that, you really just have to stay relaxed. It can feel chaotic when you're catering a large event in a space you're unfamiliar with. But I think, what it boils down to, and really why we started doing it, is a passion for serving people. And I think if you just remember that that's why you're there, sure, you want to serve really great coffee and you want to promote your brand and all those things, but you're really there to serve people and create an experience for them. And I think if you're passionate about that you can go with the flow and ignore the chaos and have a great time serving great coffee to good people.
Excellent. So in terms of, I would say your top pieces of advice for cafes that are thinking about adding mobile operations to their business, what would your top 3 pieces of advice be to them?
Well, my biggest piece of advice, when talked about this a little before, would be to talk to people that have done it before. Like I said, with some of our initial challenges, you don't know what you don't know until you've done it. You might not realize something that you forgot to even think about. So reach out to different people that have done it. And I described some of the people we reached out to. We were fortunate to kind of have a good network of people that, catering or not, they had valuable knowledge to us. If anybody doesn't have these resources, I'd definitely be happy to be that person for anybody to talk to. My email address is timc@communioncafe.com, and I would love for anybody to reach out to me and be able to share what I've learned. A second piece of advice is kind of what we were just talking about in terms of training specifically for mobile service. Don't expect that just because you have really talented baristas and they're a rock star in your shop that they're going to be able to quickly set up this off-premise setup and quickly get things rolling smoothly and know exactly how to operate in this environment. So focus on what is inherently different and unique to the catering experience. And my last piece of advice, I guess, sounds kind of corny and cliche, but just have fun. The more that you can enjoy what you're doing, enjoy serving people, enjoy making coffee, it makes those hectic times seem a lot less hectic.
Yeah, you're definitely in charge of kind of creating that atmosphere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And depending on the event, it can be a lot to handle. Sometimes you have event coordinators frantically trying to manage all this stuff and get you where you need to be, and you're pushing the limits of your speed and your skill and your efficiency, and just being able to deal with these people and provide a great experience and great hospitality in a really quick, short period of time for each person. Sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and go from there.
This has really been informative. I appreciate you taking time to sort of go over the details of something that can definitely be daunting. And it's foreign territory for a lot of folks that already have businesses. And, if people want to get started in it, they're going to have a lot of trepidation. So I feel like a lot of what you've talked about today is sort of alleviated and helped people move forward in a confident way. Yeah. How can people stay in touch with you? I know you gave your email address. How else can we stay in contact with you and what you're doing?
Follow us through Communion Cafe. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. I'm personally on Facebook. You can add me. You can email me with my email address I previously gave. Always willing to talk about my experiences and love meeting new people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. This was great. I appreciate your wisdom.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Well, like I said in the beginning, I'm such a huge fan of mobile operations. It really breaks up some of the monotony of being in the same space all the time, and it broadens your horizons in terms of what's out there in your city. I highly encourage you to take the points outlined here by Tim as they're really critical to doing this job well, and apply them to with the plans that you have for mobile operations in your cafe, even if it's not as official sounding as quote unquote mobile operations. If it's just serving cups of coffee out of a Cambro at an event, these things can still apply, and often they all do. So you want to put your best foot forward. I would say heed the advice of Tim Cox. And my thanks to Tim for helping us understand what it takes to be successful in this area based on your own success. Really enjoyed talking with you, Tim. Thank you. Now, if you want to find out more about what Tim does, you can go to communioncooperative.com, and that is the website for Communion Cafe. And you can also reach out directly to Tim if you have more questions, timc@communioncafe.com. If you'd like the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com, and there you will find a sidebar where your email address goes, and when you enter your email address, you will be signed up to receive the show notes in your inbox on a regular basis. Now, the notes are basically the main points and takeaways from each episode, including the links mentioned and resources, and those are really helpful for helping you digest and apply all of the information that we have on the show. So go to keystotheshop.com, put your email address in there, and away you go. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. I am definitely open for feedback. Always want to make the show better for you, and comments, questions are all welcome. chris@keystotheshop.com. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you have an amazing week, and you can have an opportunity to apply some of these things in your operation. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.